half will be for Helwan. And then we will have a presentation by Isabel Pereira from Coimbra University. That will take off at 10 o'clock in Coimbra time. Okay, so at the end of the webinar, I will ask you to fill in questionnaire. I'll post it again for those who are logging in. It's in the chat. Okay. Okay. At the end, we would appreciate that you fill in. It's very short. It's easy to fill in. Okay. So thank you for joining us again today. My name is Cristina Martins. Well, it's in the Zoom, you can see, from Coimbra University in Portugal, and where I coordinate the local excelling project team. I will be presenting today with Celeste Vieira, snippet of the work that we have been developing with Armanda Matos, which is in one of those little squares on the screen, in the context of Celeste's PhD dissertation in educational sciences regarding digital technologies for learning and teaching non-native languages. And this is the summary of our presentation. I'm asking Celeste to share the presentation. Thank you. The summary. Okay. Celeste will be presenting our goal for today, and we'll refer briefly to the framework reference documents that we have considered in building a typology of digital resources for non-native languages. We will then present 6 examples of digital technologies that fall into different categories of our typology and that can be productively used for teaching and learning non-native languages with a special emphasis on Portuguese. So Celeste will take on from here.
Hello, good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in this webinar. And as Christina said before, we are going to present digital technologies that can be useful for teaching and learning of non-native language according to specific classification criteria. We will present digital technologies for teaching and learning any non-native language, but we will provide some specific examples regarding Portuguese as non-native language. So I'm going now to briefly address the theoretical framework that supported the typology that we created for this context. We live in a world of changes. The ways of learning and teaching have been changing as the fast evolution of digital technologies. There are now new ways of accessing information that allow the learner to be more autonomous in all areas of knowledge. In fact, technology evolution has a big impact on the way that people can now learn languages. In the last years, European institutions have developed some reference documents, and we will talk about 3 of them today. The first one is the Digital Competence Framework for Citizens, and is a document that offers a tool to improve citizens' digital skills. The second one is the European Framework for Digital Competence of Educators, is a specific tool for teachers, both by the European Commission. And the third one is the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, Learning, Teaching, Assessment, commissioned by the Council of Europe, is a tool for development of linguistic competence in general, and also in the digital context, specifically considered in the more recent 2018 companion volume of this framework. Now we're going to talk about our typology. In my PhD, we developed this typology of digital technologies. This typology was based on the European Framework for Digital Competence for Educators that we have adapted in some parts. So, as you can see, the digital technologies can be classified in three big categories: hardware, resources, and data. Hardware includes all hardware such as computers, cell phones, tablets. The resources is a category that can be divided in three types: resource tool content, and resource content. Resource tool includes digital technology without content, allowing addition by the user. Some examples of that are Kahoot and Audacity. The second type, resource tool content, is corresponding digital technology with content. I mean, they allow some level of interaction, such inserting and obtaining a result from the system supported by a database. Some examples of these are dictionaries like Privaram or Lingui, or apps like 7link, or websites like Practice Portuguese, Portuguese with Carla, or Portal da Língua Portuguesa. And the third type is called resource content and includes digital documents that cannot be edited by the user and can present different formats such text, audio, video. An example of that is Radio Garden. We will show you later on. And finally, data. Data includes information in original state, for example, corpora of written texts or oral productions. Now I'm moving this for Cristina.
Por favor. Celeste.
Já está?
Celeste,
Sim.
continua a partilhar.
Ok. Certo. Okay.
Okay, so the digital technologies that we have selected for presentation today can also be classified according to the scope of the subjects to which they pertain. Given our time limitations, we will only briefly present 6 digital technologies highlighted in red in our diagram, at least one illustrating each of the following categories: multilingual digital technologies for non-native languages. A good example and well-known example of this category is Lingui. For example, chosen 7ling to illustrate it, since 7ling is a new app for smartphones created by the consortium of partner universities of the Excelling project. Then we have digital technologies for Portuguese in general. This category includes excellent dictionaries such as Privaram and Inforpedia, but we will look into Portal da Língua Portuguesa, a powerful research by ILTEC, which is included in Selga ILTEC, the research center to which Celeste and I belong, with multiple open access resources aimed at the general public. Then we will look at learning Portuguese as a non-native language. We refer here to the website Portuguese with Carla, but this category will be illustrated in more detail with information on Practice Portuguese, a very interesting and appealing digital technology with a great amount of open access content. Then we will briefly present Kahoot and Edpuzzle, 2 digital use not only for language teaching and learning, but for general educational purposes regarding any subject. To finish, we will consider the category of digital technologies that have been designed for other purposes, not educational purposes, but that can also be used in educational settings. A sound editor such as Audacity is a good example of this, but we will treat you with a presentation of Radio Garden, also involving sound, but in the form of raw data. Thank you. So, Sevenling is an app developed by the members of the Excelling project towards excellence in applied linguistics, innovative second language education in Egypt, and it can be downloaded from Apple's App Store or from Google Play. Sevenling is a multilingual app for learners of Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, German, and English. It contains Arabic translations of a part of its content, since it was initially designed to serve the needs of migrants coming into European countries. But it can actually be used by anyone. Because it's free, it requires no registration, it's very intuitive and very easy to use. The main menu gives access to the thematic units and to transversal content, numbers and letters, information on procedures and documents, besides grammatical and lexical contents. Activities and other resources are divided into 6 thematic units. Just arrived, in the city, shopping, looking for a flat, looking for a job, and at the doctor. In each thematic unit, the user can access relevant useful phrases, grammatical descriptions, examples of typical dialogues in text and in audio, a large amount of interactive activities and information on procedures and documents specifically relevant to that theme. Por favor. All activities covering grammatical features and vocabulary have automatic feedback, as we can see on the left of the screen. And they are randomized with every trial, so the user can go back to them over and over again and not get bored. The contents are presented in different formats: text, audio, or images. The contents are also equivalent in the 6 languages of the app. So previous knowledge of one of the languages featured in the app can actually help the user segue into a new language through comparative exploitation of the contents for each of them. Now I will share my own screen to present Portal da Língua Portuguesa. Just a moment, please. Okay, can you see my screen? Portal da Língua Portuguesa? Okay, thank you. This is a very powerful digital technology, a must for anyone who is interested in Portuguese. It provides a great number of very useful resources, especially regarding Portuguese orthography or spelling, but also morphology and phonetic variation in different varieties of Portuguese. Resources regarding Portuguese spelling are a big feature of the Portal da Língua Portuguesa. To understand the relevance of this, it is important to note that Portuguese spelling has undergone a reform of the Portuguese-speaking countries of the world. There are 2 main orthographic traditions, one stemming from Portugal and the other one from Brazil. In 1990, and in which Portuguese is an official language, aiming at the Portuguese, at unifying the Portuguese orthography. The of this spelling reform can be accessed here in a friendly format for users, and the official document, legal document that made it official. But the Portugal da Língua Portuguesa allows much more than just checking the general rules of spelling. More importantly, you can do a spelling check for a specific word that gives you all kinds of other useful information regarding that word. And you can use that, do that using this, VOP, this functionality here, VOP. And we will illustrate how this works by giving you an example. Let's take the word percepção, which it means perception in English, which is pronounced differently. This word percepção is pronounced differently in European and Brazilian Portuguese. This word used to be spelt with the P in the middle of the word, like in English perception. It used to be spelled with this P, even though in European Portuguese, this P was not pronounced. It's pronounced in Brazilian Portuguese, but not in European Portuguese. So the new rule of the spelling reform in these cases is to maintain this P in the national varieties in which it's pronounced and to eliminate it in the varieties in which it's not pronounced. So if we write percepção, there it is, percepção here in the VOP, we will access a range of important information regarding this word. We have a word classification. We have information for gender value. We have information regarding syllable structure, and this links to general information regarding syllable division in Portuguese. We have information for inflected forms of singular and plural, and even for inflectional paradigms. Since this is a noun ending in ão, this nasal diphthong, in the singular form, there are theoretically 3 different possibilities for pluralization of these nouns. Some of them end in ãos, some of them end in ões, and others end in ães. And we can access other words that follow the same inflectional paradigm here. Last but not least, we have other spelling variants of the same word and the places, the countries in which they hold. So in this case, you have information regarding the Brazilian spelling of the same word. On the right side of the menu, you can access other resources. Links, which is a program you can download to your computer that checks spelling according to the reform. It gives you information regarding the spelling alterations you have to attend to. You have other documents regarding other reforms for spelling, for some historical perspective, and you have a user-friendly presentation of the main changes that were that have taken place under the reform. And this is just a very brief glimpse of what is available on the Portugal da Língua Portuguesa. Please check it out, because even if you're not interested in Portuguese per se, this portal provides very good blueprint for building similar resources in other languages. Okay, now we're going to go on to practice Portuguese. I'm not sure if you can see the practice Portuguese. Can you see it? Okay, excellent. So this is an intuitive website that was created by Rui Coimbra, a native speaker of European Portuguese, and Joel Rendell, a Canadian who moved to Lisbon and had a hard time finding material for learning European Portuguese as opposed to Brazilian Portuguese. And this is a very well-constructed website with well thought and humorous content for learners of Portuguese of different proficiency levels. Even though access to premium, the premium version is paid, it's 15 euros a month, there's still quite a lot of content that is available in open access to explore. The main page gives us a good idea of some of this, some of the features of this digital technology, and they are especially useful for beginner learners, such as English translations of some of the content, audio recordings in slow motion, okay? And users can also access videos with subtitles, audios, and video podcasts in the website through the practice menu. Some videos are animated. Let's just see an example. This is one on inconvenient questions by children.
Não está a aparecer o som, professora Cristina.
Okay, so that's an example. There are also videos featuring members of Rui's family, namely Avó Odette, which is his grandmother. And you can find Avó Odette in different day-to-day situations. This is one of the, a very long video on doing the dishes. So very practical and day-to-day situations. And the shorties is a new feature they have added recently. These are weekly, 1 to 2 minute long videos and audios with related vocabulary. Let's just see, related vocabulary and expressions with translations in English, and obviously other content like the quizzes and the transcriptions and the downloads are only available for premium users. Learners can also access videos and podcasts. Okay, I'll give Celeste the word again.
Okay.
I need to stop interrupting. I need to stop.
Okay.
I need to interrupt. Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about Kahoot. As we said before, there are some digital technologies that can be used not only for language teaching and learning, but for general education purposes regarding any other subjects. Kahoot is one of them. Kahoot is a game-based learning platform that makes it easy to create, share, and play learning games in minutes. It's a funny way of learning. Students can be motivated by learning language as a game. It allows the creation of interactive games through various models of question, like quiz, true or false, open-ending, puzzles. The questions and possible answers are projected from the teacher's computer, and the students give their answers as quickly as possible on their own digital devices. At the end, it's possible to present the graph results and the podium of the best 3 players. I will show you a video about Kahoot. Okay.
We're Kahoot. We're on a mission to make learning awesome. Our game-based learning platform is used by millions of people all over the world. Teachers, students, company employees, and lifelong learners. Kahoot makes it easy to create fun learning games or trivia quizzes in minutes, anytime, anywhere. We call them Kahoots. It works for any subject, in any language, on any device. You can also discover and play existing games. There are millions of Kahoots in our library. Kahoot can be played in a live setting with questions on a big screen, or on your mobile device where you see questions and answers on one screen. As well as in schools, Kahoot is played in companies, at events, and even parties to make learning awesome. Sign up today at kahoot.com.
Okay, now we move on to Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle is other digital technology used for general purposes. Is a teaching tool used to place interactive content into pre-existing videos from a variety of sources like TED or YouTube. The teacher can edit videos and include notes, voiceovers, open-ending questions, or multiple choices. The students can also create their own videos and sharing. For example, they can create projects in Portuguese, in groups or individually, and the teacher can give feedback and follow the evolution. Let's see a video about Edpuzzle.
Video lessons in minutes? Edpuzzle is your missing piece. With Edpuzzle, you can choose from the millions of videos available from YouTube, National Geographic, TED Talks, Khan Academy, and more. You can also reuse ready-to-go video lessons made by other teachers or upload your very own teaching video. Then, use Edpuzzle's video editor to create your perfect lesson. Embed your own questions to check your students' understanding, cut sections to show your students only the most important parts of the video, and even record voiceover so you can explain concepts in your own words. Once you've finished, you can assign it to your students in just one click and prevent skipping to make sure your students don't miss a thing. When you want to check in on your students' progress, use Edpuzzle's hassle-free analytics to get all the information you need. See who still needs to watch the video, what your students responded, and their total scores. So remember, with Edpuzzle's free platform, you can make any video your lesson.
Okay. Okay, last but not the least, we'll show you Radio Garden. Radio Garden is a web page of satellite radio. The site interface is a three-dimensional geolocation where the user navigates through a representation of the globe, listening to live broadcasts of local radio stations. You can listen to every radio all over the world. It's amazing. Radio Garden can be an excellent option to keep in touch with any other languages. Let me show. I will show you now. Okay, as you can see, we are here in Portugal, Coimbra. And we are listening to the University of Coimbra radio. If I scroll it, I can see Portugal and Europe. Then I go to down to Africa, and I can go to, for example, Egypt. Some radio of Cairo, I know, for example. It's a wonderful tool. For me, it was an amazing discovery last time. So I will go to our presentation again. And we are finished now. This is all for now, a simple presentation about digital technologies that we think can be useful for you. And we are now available for your questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
All right.
No?
I have a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. First of all, I commend you on the portal of the Portuguese language. It's really impressive. Thank you so much. I was wondering what were some of the early steps you had to undertake in order to finish such kind of huge project?
Well, this was not. This is a project that has been being developed by a part. I'm not part of the team developing the Portugal da Língua Portuguesa. And it was developed by ILTEC, which is a research institute that was merged with CELGA in 2014. So I can't answer that question, but I certainly can put you in contact with the people who can answer the question. It's a monumental enterprise, and it's being continuously enriched, this Portal da Língua Portuguesa. It has many, many resources. We just saw a very small glimpse of the kinds of things that you can find in the Portal. Okay, but I can put you in contact with Margarita Correa, who is the person responsible for this project.
Sure, great, thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Any more questions?
Not from me.
Okay, so if not,
Yes.
I will pass on to Helwan University for the second part of this webinar.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me? Everybody?
Sure.
All right.
Yes.
Great. I'm Dr. Hayam. Do you want to say anything before I start? Okay, great. Thanks. I want to share my screen as well. I have a presentation here, so let me see. All right. See my screen share.
And انت قاعدة.
There you go. And you see my screen now. This is not being shared. Okay. There it is. Okay. So thank you very much for your, I commend you on this intriguing presentation. I really enjoyed it. It's very specific about language teaching, and it still has some resources that are both generally valid and valid specifically to language teaching. What happened here? Somebody's sharing their screen or what?
We lost your screen.
Yes. Somebody decided to share their screen. Okay. So the idea behind this presentation is not specifically about second language
هاي مش ده بتاع هانيا، دي حاجة ليا أنا.
who's this? If somebody has their mic open, can you please close it?
Since I'm the administrator, I can mute people, so I will do so.
Yes, kindly mute them all, because when they do this, I also lose my screen sharing for some reason.
Okay,
Mute
okay,
them
okay.
all and just
All right.
give Dell, that's me, give Dell the, yeah. You can't see me yet. Let me re-share my screen. All right. The idea here I wanted to talk about is a little bit general, but it has some good applications in teaching second language. Okay, mute. All right. The idea is how Helwan University started doing some kind of digital transformation. Guys, whoever is sharing things, you keep making me lose my screen sharing. So please do not share anything. Thank you. Just let me share. Dr. Amani, please don't share. All right. So I'm talking about how Helwan University started moving to use of some digital technologies. Okay, the title is Digital Training for Using a Learning Management System, LMS, in Teaching at Helwan University. My outline is, I'm just gonna give you some kind of introduction about what happened, and then I'm gonna talk about a certain training that we had for a platform I'm sure you're all familiar with, called Microsoft Teams. And then how we are planning to transition into Thinky, which is a real actual learning management system. How did this all start? The whole idea is Helwan University's strategic plan that started in 2020 had the digital transformation as one of its main strategic goals for the university. It's a goal, but when COVID-19 happened, it helped us move towards that goal in a very fast way. As you were saying in your presentation, we are at the times where there are, we need new ways of learning and education and so on. So the pandemic was a blessing in disguise. Why? Because our transfer into digitalization happened fast. The urgency of dealing with the virus made us, most of the educational staff and the students, do this shift into digitalization very fast. And the university had to introduce the concept and the culture of the learning management systems. We were, before that, we were using the traditional classroom with hardly any kind of e-learning component in our education, generally and specifically language education and training. So the university in March, with the lockdown and so on, we all had to stay home, and the result was all the faculties, the public universities in Egypt moved into use of Microsoft Teams. I don't know what happened here. Sorry about that. So with the use of Microsoft Teams, it was a very fast move, since we are all forced to stay home and so on. And the university required that some of us, a small cohort of faculty members, take an online training in Microsoft Teams, so that we can transfer our knowledge to the rest of the staff and students. So how are we to take this kind of training? It was actually an online training as well, and on the platform of Microsoft Teams. There were 3 of us from the Faculty of Arts, and we attended online. The first step we were asked to do was to download Microsoft Teams. So I'm talking here about the fact that several of us were not yet familiar with this kind of technology, or with this kind of e-learning. But we downloaded it, and the good thing that we had was that we all had academic emails. So it was good to access Microsoft Teams with our academic emails. Now, Microsoft Teams is a business communication platform. Some people use it in educational aspects as an e-learning tool, but it is not a complete learning management system. It can be implemented and considered a complete learning management system with certain tools, such as Beadle for teachers. This turns it into a sort of a learning management system like Blackboard and so on. It has certain features that are similar to learning management systems, and it was relatively successful for us in our first semester. We took this online training and through Teams, so we were introduced into how to start a meeting, how to divide channels and into weeks and so on. And this can you low الصوت ممكن شوية بس مش عارفة أركز خالص. Okay. And this helped later on in us transferring the knowledge to the students and to the rest of the faculty. So it was a good practice to take this kind of training on Teams itself. Then the 3 trainers, after the semester began, we were asked to train the rest of the faculty. The faculty is made of 18 departments with a total of 364 faculty members. 74% of the faculty completed the Microsoft Teams training that we gave them. Some of them completed it online, and some of them took it in face-to-face. As for the Department of English, the department that I'm chairing, I can say that we achieved 100% transition into some form of blended or e-learning. Now, some of the challenges that we face using Teams is that it is not considered a complete LMS. It lacks several options in education. It's not as strong as Canvas, Moodle, or Blackboard. So it needed to be complemented with something like Beadle or Learning Management System 365 and so on. Other challenges is that students preferred other platforms such as WhatsApp for communication. Also depended on the speed of the internet. Some of its weaknesses as a platform is the assessment is very difficult to do through Microsoft Teams. Integration, data migration, reporting, collaborative learning. These are some of the challenges that we faced. Now again, here Teams is a general tool, resource, you can consider it, for business, but also for education, and for teaching English as a second language to Arabic speakers. My colleagues have presented previously, in a month or so, about their experience in teaching through Teams to the Department of Computers, and what were some of the strategies they used and the challenges they faced using Microsoft Teams as well. So I'm not going to go into these details. I'm just taking this general presentation about how we moved into digitalization and we moved into using Microsoft Teams, which acted as a learning management system, but not a complete learning management system. And with these challenges, we are thinking in the second semester, the university is thinking into moving into a new platform called Thinky. This is a complete learning management system facilitated by the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. We're looking forward to it because, so I heard it's an integrated experience with full potential of reporting and of assessment, and hopefully we are going to be transitioning into Thinky soon, and we can share then our experiences with you about using it generally in education and about using it in teaching English as a foreign language for Arabic speakers. Thank you so much. That's my presentation. Do you have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I shared with you the information regarding the head of the Portugal da Língua Portuguesa project through the chat.
By the way, there is a questionnaire for people to answer at the end of the session, please.
Actually, there are two questionnaires.
There are two questionnaires. في 2 استبيان يا جماعة لو سمحتوا اللي حاضر معانا، وفي شهادات للتسجيل اللي على Okay. That's from my side. So thank you, unless you have anything else.
So thank you very much for that very enlightful presentation. We all have to move very swiftly now into into digital technologies, you know, and get acquainted with all of these different platforms to try to make our learning, our teaching experiences very joyful and motivating. It's a very, very big challenge for everyone. Yes, of course. And the advantages of having a learning management system is that everything is in the same place. And this is, I think, the biggest challenge for where we're facing is the management of all these different platforms, of all of these different technologies. And students sometimes feel, I think, a little overwhelmed. They don't know exactly where to access what they're supposed to do where, right? And so a learning management system is obviously a very powerful tool in helping us to organize everything and helping. It has video, it has chat, it has the summary for the classes, it has attendance records, but it still has a long way actually to go, because we need something, we need a central blackboard in which to organize everything. But we're moving along also.
Okay.
So I think institutions around the world are
all
taking,
doing this move. Yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like everyone, please, I would like to ask everyone, please, to take a moment to fill in the questionnaires. The links have been placed in the chat, the Zoom chat, and we are waiting for Isabel Pereira to join us. Oh, she's here. She's already here. Isabel Pereira has joined us. She's the next speaker, a little ahead of schedule. We're a little ahead of schedule, which is not common these days. But anyway, perhaps we can take 2 minutes to let you fill in the forms, the quality forms, and then we can ask Isabel Pereira to start her conference. Okay. Okay, perhaps we can start with the next part of our session with Isabel Pereira, who I welcome today, who is going to talk to us about transfer.
May I?
Isabel?
Sim.
You can start now.
Okay. Well, as you already know, I am talking today about that topic, transfer and prior linguistic knowledge effects in learning foreign languages. Well, I have something to share. May I?
Sure.
Well, that's the topic today. Well, I won't be comprehensive. I'm just talking about some points that this topic may, well, that deserve a reflection on this topic. And the topics of the talk are mainly these. Kind of definition of prior knowledge and the role of prior knowledge and transfer in learning. Then three different perspectives of transfer of the concept, of course. And then I'll talk about conditions that favor or that prevent transfer. And among those, the linguistic factors, and I'll talk mainly about phonetics, phonology, and lexicon, and then I will talk about manifestations of displays of transfer. And I will start by this quote, which is very famous. It doesn't report exactly to language learning, but to learning in general. If I had to reduce all of educational psychology to just one principle, I would say this: the most important single factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows. Of course, it is a radical statement. It doesn't mean I agree completely with that statement, but it's just to show how important previous knowledge is and has been to psychologists and researchers in that area. And it is something that we have to take in account when we are reflecting on those items. When we talk about previous knowledge, there is another concept that we have to take in consideration, which is the concept of transfer. Transfer can be, there are several perspectives of transfer. It has not been defined always the same way, and I will use here mainly three perspectives, and I will refer mainly to three perspectives of transfer. And the first one is contrastive analysis. Back in the 60s, mainly 60s of the 20th century. And transfer was seen as the transposition of information from L1 to L2 productions. So if we consider that there is, and it was considered in the most radical perspective of contrastive analysis, it was seen like that. A direct transposition of information from L1 to L2 productions, we can see, or we can conclude, that learning a foreign language is learning the differences between L1 and L2. So previous knowledge in that perspective is an obstacle to learning. Because L1 is different from L2. If the learner uses information from L1, it will difficult his task of learning L2. But, well, after that, we have another perspective, and in contrast with contrastive analysis, that perspective says L2 acquisition is mainly as L1 acquisition. So we are talking about universal grammar, we are talking about innotists, we are talking about the paradigm of learning and acquisition. In that perspective, transfer is reduced to a very secondary role. Transfer is just, transfer is just communicative strategy. Learner, in fact, a strategy to overcome ignorance. When the learner lacks knowledge in L2, he draws on previous knowledge. And in that case, previous knowledge is L1. So he uses L1 as a communicative resource. So transfer has really a very secondary role in L2 learning in that perspective. And then we have cognitivists, not just one, cognitivists perspective or cognitivist perspectivists. And according to that paradigm of learning, transfer is a cognitive mechanism that underlies L2 acquisition. It's not just a mechanical process of linguistic transposition of information from L1 to L2. It is something of much more importance than that. Just a moment. So the concept is wider. L2 influence doesn't manifest just through the direct linguistic marks as before, for instance, in the contrastive analysis paradigm, but also through other phenomena. And we will see it later, well, at the end of the talk. But phenomena like delay of rule restructurings, for instance, phenomena like avoidance or overgeneralization of rules or overuse of certain structures are conceived also as manifestations of transfer of L1 or of previous knowledge, not just L1 knowledge. So we can conceive transfer as a learning facilitator, and in that perspective, transfer can be seen as a learning facilitator. Well, and we as language teachers know that transfer of L1 or of other languages previously known can be a learning facilitator. But transfer also restricts the acquisition process because, well, you all know how an interlanguage is built. By constructing and reconstructing hypotheses based on the examination of data, on the observation of regularities, on the formulation of generalizations. L1 and other prior knowledge, like the knowledge of other languages, is a source that the learner uses to build his or her universe of hypotheses. In that case, prior knowledge restricts the hypothesis the learner may formulate because it's knowledge that he uses, it's information that he or she uses to build those hypotheses. And in that case, transfer restricts the acquisition process. And this is this is a statement of that perspective of learning. When we talk about transfer, we must think of what can be transferred, what is transferable, and any theory of transfer may ask those questions. Which items, which structures does the learner choose to transfer? Or the learner perceives as transferable. And there are different types of factors that restrict transfer or that promotes transfer. And linguistic factors, for instance, psycholinguistic factors, social linguistic factors, non-structural factors such as individual differences like age, like social group, or even the nature of the task to perform by the learner. It can restrict the process of transfer also. There are some if we talk about the linguistic factors, and well, I will focus on the on some linguistic factors. If we focus on linguistic factors, there are some levels of linguistic structure where transfer is more obvious than in others. And two of those linguistic structure or the linguistic levels are phonetics and phonology, and also the lexicon. We all are aware of what is called foreign accent. You are listening to me, and you are clearly distinguishing a foreign accent of English. It's quite perceivable, and we even can identify different foreign accents. We can identify an Italian, well, I am generalizing, but well, you don't mind, an Italian speaking English, or a Spanish speaking English, or even a Portuguese speaking English, a Japanese speaking English. We can identify different foreign accents, and that is easily observable either in the segmental level, I mean the individual sounds, as in the prosodic level, namely intonation, which is quite often, even if at the segmental level the articulation is very close to target, the prosodic level shows us that it is a foreign speaker of a certain language. But let's talk about, because it is quite difficult to study the foreign intonation. It is easily perceivable, but is very difficult to study. Ockebon, which is one researcher, a German researcher of foreign accents exactly, told me that intonation is a topic that he will never study because he doesn't know where to start. But when we talk about segments or individual sounds, and I am talking about sounds and phonological segments, usually L2 learners seem to project the phonetic categories of their native language on the sounds of L2 whenever it is possible. That is, there are sounds of L2 that he perceives as similar to sounds of L1. So the learner classifies those sounds as equivalent. Even when there are perceptible acoustic differences between L2, the L2 sounds and the L2 equivalent sounds. So I am going to simplify this. There are several theories, several frameworks that study that and that allows to and that allow to study that, but I am going to simplify. Usually the learner has to learn a system of sounds of another language. Some sounds are resemblant with sounds of his or her own language. Those are equivalent sounds. And other sounds are completely different or quite different. So different that he categorizes them in a different category. He creates a new category for those sounds. And it seems that it's harder to learn an L2 sound that is equivalent to an L1 sound than to learn a completely different sound. For that, a new category is created, so more attention from the learner is given to that learning, or to the learning of that sounds, and to the accuracy of the articulation or of the perception of that sound. When the sound is equivalent, it is perceived and produced in a way that is quite similar to the sound of L1. And that's why you can hear Portuguese speakers of English, for instance, articulating the interdental th of English as d, the dental correspondent sounds of Portuguese. And the very same interdental sounds of English produced by French people as a fricative, an alveolar fricative or a dental fricative, which is quite common in speakers from in native speakers of those languages. And well, this is true for perception as well as for production. The production of sounds, and let's talk about production more specifically. The production of sounds involves I am sorry, but my computer changes changes some words to Portuguese. That's why you can find some mistakes here. The production of sounds involves an internal representation of the target sounds, and then the adequate motor commands that are internalized production rules. So there is a problem when you learn sounds from a different language, or there may be a problem. The internal target is not well formed. So you have an image of the sound that doesn't correspond exactly to the target. And On the other hand, the motor program is based in non-controlled production rules. Be aware that a child takes years to produce accurately the sounds of her native language. It's true that when you learn a second language, you already can produce language sounds and quite a vast number of language sounds. But your organs are prepared to articulate the sounds of your language or of other language, your language or your languages. And so the motor program has internalized certain rules of production. When learning a second language, a third language, the motor program is not or maybe not prepared to produce the new sounds that you will find in the L2. So that can be a problem. Examples from this. Most Spanish learners of Portuguese articulate that fricative, whose place of articulation in Portuguese is predorsal alveolar, the sound is S, as an apical fricative, S. They are similar, it's true, the points of articulation are not so distant, but perceptually, it is quite different. In that case, the L2 sound is classified as identical, as equivalent by Spanish learners, equivalent to the existing sound of Spanish. In fact, the sound exists mainly in words that are cognates to words of Portuguese. And this is an additional reason to assume that sound as an equivalent sound. So you can easily identify a Spanish speaker speaking Portuguese. This is not the only case. There are other sounds that Spanish people consider equivalent or classify as equivalent and then produce it as in Spanish. The same for some laterals, but the Portuguese do the same. Portuguese speakers speaking Spanish do the same with the same sounds or equivalent sounds, and with others. It is quite interesting, but there are two. Well, this is example of another thing that I will talk about in the next slide. I'll let it to the next slide. Another example. Timorese speakers of Portuguese articulate the dental plosives as apical, while the articulation in other varieties of Portuguese is predorsal, to d, and which is articulated by Timorese people to d. And this is the place of articulation of the equivalent sounds in Tetum and other languages spoken in the territory. L2 production involves not just the phonetical level, but also the phonological level. And it involves phonological reorganization. And of course, the modification of patterns of phonetic articulation. Both aspects are interrelated, of course. And the non-existence of a certain phonological contrast in L1 difficults the learning task of contrasting those sounds in L2. And there are multiple examples of that. It is quite common in Chinese learners of Portuguese that mistake are using indifferently sábado and sapato. Those two words have quite different meanings. But in Chinese, there is no difference or phonological difference between the voiced and unvoiced plosives, like you have b, p. There is no phonological contrast, and also the t. So b, p. It is quite common that Chinese learners don't perceive the difference between the voiced and the unvoiced plosives. And there is another question here, because Chinese has is not a stress language. So the difference of stress between those two words is not perceived as well. So it is quite common to hear or to read in texts, in written texts by Chinese learners of Portuguese, that word or one or the other word instead of the right word they want to use. Spanish learners of Portuguese, Spanish has no distinction, phonological distinction between those two. I put the phonetic symbol, but it's okay. Of those two phonological units, well, in Spanish you have just one phonological unit. In some varieties of Portuguese too. So what happens? Those learners don't do the distinction, and they use the sound b always. Sometimes, like Portuguese speakers of some variants do also, they do some hypercorrections. So they use v in words where they should use b. And that process is quite common also in native speakers of the variants where the distinction doesn't exist either. We are talking about those phonological distinctions, which imply phonetic distinctions. And the Spanish learners of Portuguese have also difficulties in distinguishing some vowels of the vocalic system of Portuguese. We have, a wider vocalic system than Spanish, and they have usually difficulties in distinguishing between a, e, o, because those distinctions don't don't exist in Spanish. So when there's not just a phonetic difference, but also a phonological difference, the difficulty is, well, is wider. Lexicon is another level of linguistic structure where we can, well, transfer can be obvious. Lexical learning is promoted by linguistic proximity between L1 and L2. There is positive transfer in that case. But on the other hand, a significant part of the errors result from the partial translation of equivalent lexical items. That means negative transfer. There is a very interesting study by Leiria, 2002, that shows that the most distant from Portuguese is L1, the most reduced is the vocabulary of learners. I am so sorry. Here, my computer did really some changes. She studied five groups of learners, five different native languages, from Spanish to Chinese, and different linguistic distances between Portuguese and those languages. And this is one of the this is one of the conclusions of the study. Spanish students use Spanish students use in a positive way transfer of lexical items, and they have levels of understanding and even levels of communication. I won't say it is formally correct, but it is effective, communicatively effective. And Chinese, of course, well, Chinese don't use positive transfer because they have the perception that they have nothing. They have the perception, subjective, not exactly objective, that they have nothing to transfer from their previous knowledge, mainly from their L1 knowledge. So their vocabulary is reduced to the items of Português Fundamental, which is, well, the set of words that are most commonly used. And they some lexical items are quite frequent in their speech. So in linguistic proximity tends to to the use of loan words as a strategy for compensation of lexical deficits. That means that, for instance, and I am going to use the extremes. Spanish learners pick in Spanish the lexical items they need to communicate, either if their choice is correct or incorrect. But linguistic distance, on the other hand, uses formal neologisms as a strategy for compensation for lexical deficits. So in both cases, they use prior knowledge, but learners of Spanish use their L1. Learners of Chinese, for instance, use the L2 knowledge they already have because they produce new words with the constituents they already know. So they use different strategies, but both strategies have recourse to prior knowledge. Manifestations of transfer. There are several ways we can observe transfer working in the speech of learners, L2 learners. Well, of course, the most common is errors. And errors are an instance or are instances of negative transfer. Although not all errors are instances of negative transfer. On the other side, you have lack of errors or quickly learning, and those can be instances of positive transfer. You can't just say, if there are no errors, then the strategy is positive transfer. No, you can't say that. But you have to have more information about that lack of errors to attribute it to positive transfer. Another way you can, well, of manifestation of transfer is avoidance. Learners tend to avoid structures or items that they don't know. But it's not just structures that they don't know. If they don't know, they don't use it, of course. No. We can just talk about avoidance when we are aware that the learner knows something of the structure. But the learner is also aware that he or she doesn't know enough to use the structure. And that's just in that case that we can talk of avoidance as a manifestation of transfer. It's not to avoid. If you don't know a structure, you don't avoid it. You just don't use it because you don't know it. To talk about avoidance, you have to know something about it. But you have the perception, wrong or right, that you don't know enough to use that structure. And the overuse of structures and the overgeneralization is the opposite of avoidance, and it's a consequence. It's also a consequence of avoidance. Because you avoid some structures, you are forced to use others that you already know, and you use it more frequently than you should. And well, those are the main manifestations of transfer. And I will stop here.
Thank you, Isabel. Are there any questions for Isabel? We have a comment on your accent in English in the chat, which is excellent according to
it's
Lenovo. Thank you for that very inspiring comment. Okay. Okay, if there aren't any questions, I would ask everyone, if you haven't done so already, to fill in the form regarding this last part of the this part, Isabel's presentation, okay, which is one of the activities of the LIC. LIC is an acronym for linguistic innovation or language innovation centers, which is a network of language innovation centers that was created in the Egyptian partners of the Excelling Project, exactly to promote activities such as the ones we are engaging in today. So, does anyone have any questions regarding the activities today or the Excelling Project? We're happy to answer any questions regarding the Excelling Project also. Maha, I have your hand in the air.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Very interesting seminar and very interesting topics. But I have just a question concerning, this was a great overview of language transfer, positive transfer and negative transfer. But my question is, what should we do as teachers to encourage more of positive transfer and avoid negative transfer when we teach students?
That's the big question. Well, usually I don't know if your students are a homogeneous group and homogeneously speaking native, or the same native language. If so, you already know some of the characteristics, or you probably know some of the characteristics of the native language that most probably will negatively be used in the learning of L2. And there you have to find strategies. You have to find strategies to avoid that negative interference of L1, but it depends. It depends on the structures. It depends on the structural level of language. Let's talk, for instance, about phonetics and phonology. Phonetics and phonetic articulation is probably one of the areas, the language learning areas where practice can be more fruitful, because to achieve a target articulation in some segments, and I'm just talking about the segmental part, but to achieve the target articulation, you have to practice a lot. So in that part of the phonetic, practice can be useful and can be effective. In others, you have to in other structural items, you have to find the right strategy, because it depends on the structure, and to promote the use of positive transfer. You can do it, for instance, teaching lexicon, teaching vocabulary, to promote the use of cognates, for instance. Of course, you will find the false friends, but false friends are just a few. Usually, when you have cognates into languages, L1 and L2, they will have, if not exactly the same meaning, an approximate meaning. So it depends. It depends on the structure, on the level of, on the structural level of language, and you have on the languages involved. You will have to find yourself, but there's literature on that, and you can find some ideas in the literature, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would just like to add to that, that maybe a very productive strategy would be to focus on, and counterintuitive would be to focus on things that are very similar between the two languages, because that's exactly Isabel highlighted in her talk. It's exactly where, especially in as far as production, phonetic production is concerned, that is more likely where the problems are going to reside. Things that are similar enough, but not exactly the same, right? And those are probably going to be the long-lasting transfer effects that we're going to find in learners. A Greek has put her hand in the air. Greek?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
Okay.
You're on your phone. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
So also it's the continuation question to Dr. Isabel, but I don't know if you have an answer or not. I was wondering if there are any literature or studies that have been done on the use of, for example, digital tools in improving the phonological errors that happen between L1, the transfer in L1 and L2, because as you know, with the new technologies, people have been listening to software, they can hear themselves. Has these things improved the error rate in the transfer from L1 to L2, or no studies, or you're not aware of any studies that have tackled that?
No, I don't, well, ultimately, I don't, I don't have, at the moment, I don't have the references, no, but I can, later, I can come to you and give you some information, yeah.
Okay, so do we have any other questions for Isabel or anybody else? For a Greek also? Thank you, Lenovo. Okay, so if no one has anything else they'd like to ask, I would like to thank everyone for having participated in our session this morning. It was very international panel. We have Hayam here with us also. I don't know if she wants to, which is our co-organizer of this event and the coordinator of the leak in Helwan University in Cairo. It was a great pleasure to get people together from all over the world. Despite our troubles, our current troubles today, we are able to use technology to get together, and it was very, very fruitful, I think, for everyone. It certainly was for me. Hayam, please.
Just I would like to give many thanks for our dear colleagues from Coimbra University it was a pleasure to see you virtual via and to follow you in the league of Helwan University. It was a very fruitful and useful time, and of course I would like to give many thanks for my dear colleague Dr. Arig Ibrahim for her collaboration and participation, and of course many thanks for all the attendees. We have one professor or one colleague here in the league, is Radwa, and it was very difficult to have attendees in the league now, because we are in the period of vacation and we have no classes now. But many thanks for all the attendees online, and of course thank you very much, Christina, for organizing this great webinar. Many thanks for all our colleagues from Coimbra University.
Thank you, Hayam. It's always a pleasure. It was nice to see you.
No, como se dice, obrigada.
Obrigada, sim.
Oh. Thank you very much for everyone.
Okay, e até a próxima. We'll have another conference in 2 weeks regarding the role of non-native learners in the formation of different varieties, international varieties of Portuguese. It will also be in English. We're using our platform to disseminate the Portuguese language also, which is also one of the goals. And we will send information, updated information regarding that event very shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. But it will be very difficult for us here in Egypt because we will have exams. That they will start the next week. But I will do my best to disseminate the event.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hayam. Thank you. Goodbye.
Would you like to say something, Dr. Arig?
Thank you all. It was a pleasure meeting you and listening to your very intriguing presentations. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm the host for this Zoom session. So as soon as I close, everybody will implode. Okay. Okay. So see you soon, I hope, and have a nice week. And we will probably meet together very shortly. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.